It's a couple minutes past the hour. Couldn't be more excited to share with you some initial results from a community-driven initiative that these folks up here, agency folks, as well as Z from High Conversion, have been a part of. It's an absolutely fascinating attempt to close what everybody in the room knows as the mobile conversion gap. We're calling it the mobile revenue gap. The biggest problem that we see from a PayPal perspective and the agency see in the space today is that mobile continues to increase. Mobile is hot, but conversion is not. We see mobile conversion rates at roughly 1.5%, where desktop converts at 3%. That represents billions of dollars of potential revenue, and in the past, billions of dollars of lost revenue. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the experimentation that these folks have been a part of to attempt to close that mobile revenue gap. So these fantastic panelists here today are going to talk about some of those initial results. We'll talk about the testing approach that we've put in place. And if you'd all like to be a part of that, there's an opportunity at the end to be a part of this initiative. So without further ado, would love to introduce you to John, Paul, Brent, and Oliver. Let's give them a hand and get to know them a little bit better. So the joke that I've been telling through the entire presentation is Z from High Conversion is stuck in traffic right now. So we have a last-minute addition to the team here. It's John from PayPal. John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm caught off guard. And,
welcome.
Basically, I run a team of solution engineers for partners, and we're highly engaged with the Magento community. We, as part of PayPal, obviously see payments, but we also see the difficulty, and with credit card in particular, which is part of the discussion here. And I keep saying to everybody, credit cards are a commodity. Doesn't matter who you use, we all have the same problems. And that's part of what this initiative is, and that's why we're really happy that this is going on,
right.
And the results have been fascinating.
And that's a great, fantastic. We don't want this to be a PayPal panel, so that's the last time John's going to talk for the rest of the night. But
That's good. That's good.
Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. I'm Paul Lima from Philadelphia, founder of Lima Consulting Group, started in 2004, and we do a lot of work on digital transformation strategy, and then the implementation for the marketing clouds from the usual suspects. The largest part of our business is in the Adobe Marketing Cloud. We do a lot of work in Latin America and the United States, and we came to this relationship through the High Conversion relationship, actually. But as Magento was recently acquired by my largest partner, Adobe, it's been a very fortuitous connection there. And we have a lot of specializations around the Adobe Analytics product suite and the Adobe Advertising Cloud, and really the science of marketing. So we do a lot of work also with the Oracle and NetSuite solutions. But in terms of the e-commerce component, we'll be able to, and are bringing a lot of value in terms of our data science team and some of the strategic part of digital transformation to the initiative.
That's awesome. Thanks for being a part of this today. And Brent?
My name is Brent Peterson. I'm with Magento. We're a Magento solution integrator. And we're also very active in Latin America, and what we've seen there is that it's mobile first always. And so some of the things we're learning in the Latin market is that this mobile first is going to be, has to be in the US, and this study has been fantastic to learn about the different aspects of what converts and what doesn't.
Awesome. And Oliver?
Oliver Sosinski. I'm a solutions engineer at Red Stage Worldwide. So we're a full-service digital agency focusing kind of in the B2B space. So as a solutions engineer there, I work on kind of architecting technical solutions for our clients' business needs.
Awesome. That's great. And so as I mentioned at the outset, the figure is well known. We like to say within the organization and the initiative, mobile is hot, conversion is not. Some people use it. Mobile is hot, conversion is not. That's John. But it's a well-known problem in the space today. John, do you want to talk to us just a little bit about what we see as far as the data around the mobile conversion gap?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of data out there, and the biggest thing that we that merchants see and data that supports it is people are on websites with their device way more than they are with desktop, right? And yet, when you look at who actually finishes and pays, it's just completely out of whack, right? So there's this gap that we all know, and you know, there's got to be things we can do to make the experience better, and that's really what it was all focused about, is how do we make that experience better so that somebody who's on a phone actually completes a transaction.
And so Z, we have this initiative that's been pulled together. Can you talk to us a little bit about the agency, the number of agencies, the number of merchants, and some of the initial data?
Sure, so you know, the whole thing is this is a big problem, right? So somebody like a Walmart obviously has the size and the volume of transactions, the resources to do it. So we're essentially trying to accomplish the same thing, just in a more as a community, right? So I think we're somewhere around 17 or 18 system integrators who participated. We have 63, I think we're trending closer to 80 merchants who have gone through this effort, and we asked them to participate for 60 days. They get to pick whatever treatments they want to try out that they think is best for them, and they test those different treatments.
Yeah, and so as a part of this model, and I'd love to get a perspective from the rest of the folks on the panel as well, we tried to figure out at the outset, what's the best thing to measure? What's that one thing to measure? We all in the e-commerce business, those of us that have been here a while, AOV and conversion rate are the thing that we always talk about. But the folks from High Conversion, and Oliver, I'd love to have you talk about it a little bit as well. This notion of RPV, can you set the context, and then we'd love to hear from those folks.
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, everybody knows conversion rate and average order value. That's what we all measure. That's what everybody bases. Did this work or not? If my conversion rate went up and my average order value didn't go down, that's good. If my conversion rate stays flat, but my average order value goes up, obviously that's good. And the problem is sometimes conversion rate goes up, average order value goes down. You as a merchant, did I make money or not? And that's where revenue per visit is that bottom line. It really factors in those two things. So that's what we focused on, because at the end of the day, that's dollars to your pocket, and that's what's the most important thing.
Yeah, and so Oliver, it's not the first time that I'd heard it, but it was really the first time that it landed for me. Is this something that, from a Red Stage perspective, you folks have been working RPV for a long time, or is it something that's fairly new as a metric?
Yeah, I would say that's what we've been focusing on as a metric for visitors, because it's the simplest way to look at it. You're looking at how much revenue you're getting from each visitor.
Yeah.
It pretty much takes the how big is their orders and how likely are they to check out of the equation, and just looks at that. That's the thing that matters, right?
Yeah.
How much money are we getting from each of the visitors?
Yeah,
To say.
and Brent, I know the merchants that I talk to, generally it's conversion rate, generally it's AOV. How's it going to impact those? Does a notion of RPV land with the merchants that you work with?
I think conceptually it might, but I don't know. All the merchants don't think about that, and it takes something like this to kind of, let's just say, shove it down their throat to get them to realize that this is really important. And the slide you had before this that showed that upside down of desktop versus mobile, they don't see that unless you show it to them.
Yeah. Same question for you, Paul. Is this something that lands with the folks that you work with?
Absolutely. We usually get brought in on the analytics side of things, and what we're looking at really, and we have this story that we tell about, looking at, and I have a picture of a beautiful flower bed in a natural garden, and there's all the flowers. There's red and green and gold ones, and the CFO hates the red ones. Kind of likes the green ones and really loves the orange ones. And then I say, don't do the time, avoid the crime. And if you're looking at your analytics like that with, hey, how many what's my conversion rate across the group for mobile, desktop, and tablet, that's kind of looking at everything in aggregate. And then I show another slide of a flower farm. And all the green ones and the yellow ones and the red ones are all lined up. And it's really important to be able to look at your data by, in this case, the channel. And you're going to see that in some of the examples of the high conversion platform.
Yeah, and so it really does, I'll take this one, John. This was supposed to be Z's slide, but I'll take this one. So it does really take a community to pull this together. So we've been working with fantastic solution partners, solution agencies, from the folks that you see here, plus another 13 folks, as well as some amazing technology partners. One of them is High Conversion. What do we call them? The source of truth, John?
Yeah, I think it is, because at the end of the day, we felt as a community, have all that data collected by one company whose expertise is A/B multivariate testing, right? So every merchant gets their own results, but the beauty of high conversion is they're aggregating those results across all the merchants, which allows them to kind of identify this change and this change together have a bigger impact, or maybe they're conflicting, right? So it's hard to do that at a single merchant, but with high conversion, since they're aggregating it and they basically say it's math, right? But they have a way to tell what things work together and have the most impact.
Yeah, and so it's not PayPal data, it's not Magento data. There's a source of truth that's out there that's independent. That's working with agencies.
Right.
That's fantastic. So initial results. This one happens to be my favorite of the experiments because it was the least intuitive. I think there's a less tortured way to say that. But Oliver, can you talk us through this one? I love this experiment. Well, let's talk first about the results from this one, the security lock icon test.
Sure, this one kind of frustrates me actually because it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's just placing a lock icon, and we did stuff like changing the behavior of the zip code fields and the credit card input fields. But this test here had pretty much the most consistently positive results across all devices out of most of what we tested. And I mean, all we're talking about here is placing an icon on the checkout button that kind of gives the visitors a feeling of, this is a secure checkout process. And it's funny that such a small difference can have such big results, but it really did. I mean, the data showed that mobile visitors especially, received double-digit increase in revenue per visitor with that little tiny change.
Yeah.
So.
And so I want to go back for
Kinda
just a second. Brent, so the change was literally take the shopping cart off, put the security icon on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting part about that is if you're strictly data, you're never going to think about it.
Yeah.
If you're completely design, you're like, oh yeah, duh, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But you never know unless you do the test. And that's where
Right.
this exercise told us, hey, the little lock.
And so, Paul, is this one of the gold flowers, or is this one of the red flowers, or is this all of that?
You see, this is the beauty of actually looking at the analytics. So in this case, beautiful. So you actually can see in all three cases, this was one of the first tests that this was revealed, where in every channel there was an uplift. And this is one of the key takeaways for anybody doing A/B testing, multivariate testing, in your programs, you can go in with the hypothesis, but there are several examples where of the 60-something high conversion aggregate results, where 80% of them, it worked. And then there are others that was just inverse.
Yep.
It didn't work for that organization. And the takeaway is, you just can't say, oh, this button is the best practice, this is the gold flower.
Yeah.
You have to test it on your website to see. There's just no other shortcut.
Yep. So John, help us understand and land, because there's the histogram there, which the folks at High Conversion absolutely love. I love it too, but it took me a little bit to set the context there.
Yeah, so if you look at it, there's the green section. So those are the merchants who
And it may be difficult to see how your face may be in the way.
Those are the merchants that got a positive result. So the higher the peak, the more benefit they got out of it. But then the ones in the reddish color are the ones who got the pink color had a negative result, right? And this one kind of shows pretty strongly that in almost all cases you got some good results. There's some tests where it's amazing how we had two completely different groups. One group, it was either really good or it was really bad.
The bathtub curve.
Yeah, it was, when we couldn't predict it.
And so the context here for folks in the audience is this happens to be called a mobile optimization initiative, but we're testing against all form factors. And you see the histogram that's down below is the distribution of results just on mobile. We also have a similar histogram for the other devices. So this next one, John, I'd love for you to take, help us understand what this next test is.
Yeah, this is another one of the kind of duh things to me. It's forcing somebody, the more clicks you do on mobile, we all think is bad, right? So why make them say this is a Visa card, this is a MasterCard, when we know from the first couple of digits, definitely by the first four, you know exactly what kind of card it is, right? So there's so many sites out there that still do it today, and it's just unnecessary. So it was a pretty straightforward one we expected to work well, and it did.
Yeah, and the interesting thing for this one is we've said for years, reduce the number of clicks, reduce friction. And this is a fascinating one for me because we're saying it increased results 21.53%. But Paul, if you look at the different context here, RPV in tablet is negative. And Oliver is hilarious because he always brings the most interesting results, and tablet is always out there.
Yep. We kind of figured that tablet would either track mobile or desktop, but it seems to kind of do its own thing. I guess what we really learned from the tablet results is that we're not very good at guessing. I mean, so that just kind of drives home the need to actually look at our test results, not just aggregated, but on a per device basis, so that, you know, if we have a positive, lift for one of those devices, let's only apply it to those visitors and not use it on the visitors that are having a negative result.
Right, and the strange thing about this one, we're seeing a massive improvement for desktop, but we're on the mobile context, which we're testing, it's negative. Paul, did you have, I mean, from that perspective, it's just keep testing, right?
Just that consumer insight alone is worth the value of the test. And what really was interesting here is we know that the AOV for most of the merchants in the study is greater on desktop than it is for the other two channels. So, 21% uplift, the test paid for itself.
Yeah.
But that consumer insight is, in my opinion, worth more than the actual uplift.
Yeah, and similar question. So, John, the results distribution on this one, again, this is just for mobile.
Right.
There's no green.
No, it's a flat line, right? I mean, there's green there. It's just you don't see the huge spikes, which is why you get, to me, essentially, less than 1% means it didn't have any impact.
Yeah, and so takeaway for this one, Brent, is.
I mean, I think as a merchant, and if you have a responsive site, you know that you can use this data to massage how you want that experience to happen.
Yep.
And you can start using this to get that negative back to a positive.
Yeah, and perhaps do something, this sort of treatment just for desktop. Make sure that you have it live for desktop, but have a different experience for phone.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so the two PayPal people that are on the panel will not be speaking to this one at all because it's a little self-serving, but Oliver, walk us through this one, if you could.
So for this test, we wanted to see what was the impact in behavior when we put the PayPal Express button right there on the mini cart. So this was, we were really curious to see how this was going to impact the results, because the hypothesis is, that a lot of people have, is that giving that PayPal Express option is going to decrease average order value. So this goes back to the importance of looking at RPV instead of needing to sort out the combined impacts of AOV and conversion rate. So for this test, for RPV, we did see a pretty positive result across the board. We saw that it increased the likelihood of users to check out and actually increased the AOV as well at the same time. So that was a very positive result from that test.
And so, Brent, fairly positive results, as Oliver said, across the board. From your perspective, do you hear that, I'm not talking about PayPal, but wallet solutions, that it could potentially negatively impact AOV? What are some of the results saying here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great test to look at by adding the PayPal Express button, because sometimes merchants may have a negative feel about that yellow button there, but it shows that it works. I think the interesting part would be if you added 7 of them, it's probably going to be negative.
Sure, NASCAR.
There's going to be some balance between the 2 buttons versus 7 or 10 buttons.
Yeah. And from a multivariate testing perspective, last question on this one, Paul. So we're seeing lots of green in the distribution, but we're also seeing some negative in the pink. What does that tell you about wallet solutions and adding those to the checkout process?
Well, we've run at this point over 22 different tests that are kind of prefabricated in a high conversion testing solution. To my memory, and I might be wrong on this was the only one that every one of those cells was a positive, right? And so the concept of particularly on the product level pages, this concept from the PayPal Express, it's just working in every solution. We haven't seen a loser yet.
That's awesome. And thank you for saying nice things about PayPal. We love that. So we did see wildly unexpected results. One of them, we were actually presenting in in Barcelona. So we've called this one the zip code test. There it's the postal code test. So help us understand, Brent, this postal code one, it should be a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody would not want their zip code auto-filled, other than they're shipping it somewhere else.
Yeah, and so put in the postal code, everything is auto-filled. From a phone perspective, we have been saying for years, automate it as much as possible. I don't want to have to click in my state, city, state, area. We all thought that this was going to be a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, this one drove us mad. It just the hypothesis was so evident, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier. You have to test it, and so the unexpected results was it was a loser. And this is a bathtub curve again, right? So this was highly bifurcated, and what we're looking at here is a bunch of websites where it didn't work. And when you start looking at the merchants and the nature of what was being sold on those websites, you could start to begin to do hypotheses around why it didn't work. But the other part to this was that there wasn't a middle ground. You either hated it or you loved it. And in this case, for those that it really did work, it worked very well. And you can't figure this out on your own. The marketers that try to be an N of one and figure it out on their own really aren't classically trained, highly developed marketers. They will fail. You need to try to rely on the data and run the test and see on which end of the merchant category where you are.
Yeah, and Oliver, the same question for you. We're seeing some positive for desktop, but this one's a stinker, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the data just tells you what, and it doesn't really tell you why.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can really explain all the results at the end of the day. We just have to kind of trust the numbers and act based on the data and not on our intuitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, we're seeing some green there, and I don't have my glasses. I don't think you do either. But the green there is encouraging from a sense that we have the ability to continually modify these tests, right?
That's right. I think that's a big finding. There's a number of tests, and this is one of them where we got some initial results, and it led us to drill down, right? For the ones that it didn't work, why didn't it work? And that actually was really insightful in a number of cases, and we modified the test with that knowledge and the performance change. So this is one that we would love to kind of keep teasing out, as Rob loves the teasing out word.
Unpack it.
Yeah, or unpack it.
Yep.
But we would like to continue because that big, where it works really well with some and doesn't for others, we want to understand why. And it may become that for some merchants, and we can identify what kind of merchant, just don't try it. Or it may become some modification to what we're doing and we'll see better results.
Yeah, and so Brent, you're closer to that. It says 38% saw greater than 10% lift on mobile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just goes back to we want to target those areas that we want to key in on, and let's work on that. And like John said, let's continue to diversify it to work in the areas that we need to work in.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, by way of recapping, so Paul, help us understand. So, absolutely yes for the security icon?
In large part, yes. That was an absolute yes.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, and then the data entry steps, that one had some mixed results, but for the most part was a positive. The PayPal one was the strongest of the three, and then the fourth one there about the zip code is try it. You got to try it. Don't think that you're smart enough with your own hypothesis to guess right, because it had different behaviors depending on the nature of the product.
Yeah. And Oliver, you've been so close to this data forever. I mean, does that track with what you're seeing with the merchants that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And even for some of these mostly positive tests, it's still worth testing performance on your own site, because even that checkout button that was pretty much positive across the board, there were still some merchants where for just one or two of the viewports, there were still negative results. So the value in testing there is only showing the treatment to the segments of visitors where it's going to have a positive impact.
Yeah, and so Brent, you know this very, very well. We're testing one teeny tiny component of checkout, very important, the wallet, when you're getting access to your customers and customers' wallets, but there's a lot more that can be tested through a process like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even the initial experience of landing and then trying to get somebody to buy something on a mobile device, And then how do you get to buy that second thing
Yeah.
is the biggest, that's like one of the biggest things we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, from your perspective, being in the Adobe space, this is something we have the opportunity through an initiative like this to test everything, right?
Well, we do, and I think that's also with that power comes great responsibility, right?
Yep.
And so if you're a part of the A/B testing team, one of the I will promise you, if you're leading a team like that, one of their greatest challenges is figuring out what gets on the testing calendar. And one of the benefits of the high conversion platform is, and you saw the word up there, widgets. There are 22 widgets, and the team and the SIs, we meet every Friday, and we're working on suggesting each widget and how to enhance them and accelerate the number. I mean, there's 2 or 3 being launched every week. So these are all widgets. They're literally deployed with the code that goes in the tag, and they can be up in minutes. So if you're thinking about putting together a testing program and looking at what are we going to test, right out of the box, within minutes, you're going to be able to deploy up to 22. And these are in the checking, the shopping cart, the payment pages. It's all throughout the Magento platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brent, and we're going to have a minute or two for questions. So if you have questions, be thinking of them now. From your perspective, working as part of the initiative, has it been a positive result for your merchants, and how's that experience been for the merchants that have been a part of it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's an eye-opener to a lot of merchants, and giving them this ability to do this testing, and it's been fantastic for them.
Yeah, and from a red stage perspective, we've produced a lot of data now. We have initial results out on the community site. You guys have been, from the outset. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it's been from an agency perspective, working with basically competitor agencies every Thursday and talking about, testing? It's
been pretty collaborative, actually. It hasn't really felt like competition. On our Thursday calls, we meet every week for this, and it's pretty friendly. We're all trying to work together to figure this out. We're not really competing over these merchants, so this has been a pretty collaborative experience, I think.
Awesome, fantastic. And so mobileoptimize.org is the website. We do have the opportunity for agencies and merchants to become involved, to be involved. How do you say that, John?
Yeah, to be involved.
To be involved, yes,
Join us.
absolutely. Join us. And this is not just a study within North America, it's also within Europe, Asia, and across the rest of the world, in particular these 2 folks here from LATAM perspective as well. So it's really a great opportunity. So we have a minute or 2. I think we have a question already. Let's go for it. We don't have microphones, so you have to speak from the belly.
Sure. Thank you. I think there was some information on the bottom right of each slide regarding the population of the study.
Yes.
More importantly, can you allude to maybe the demographics of that population, the industries that were from?
Absolutely. So to repeat the question, a little bit more about the demographics and the population of the merchants that we worked with. John, can you take that one?
Yeah, I think, when we went into this, it's a challenge, right? And so we as a collective tried to say, let's primarily make this B2C. And so the mix we were trying to get to was 75% B2C and 25% B2B. I think we're pretty close to that. I think my guess is we're probably a little heavier on the B2C than that. And then we also were looking for merchants that would have enough transaction volume to get meaningful data for themselves, right? And so in general, we were saying $5 million in annual is kind of a really nice target, but we also absolutely went down from that if they had a lower AOV, meaning we'd still get the same number of transactions because this is a data-driven analysis. So we have a pretty good mix. Majority of them have been in North America. Mm-hmm. We did have some in Europe. We did have some in Asia. And you guys had just brought some on from LATAM area. But next year and as we go forward, we are absolutely pushing towards having Europe being a bigger part. We'll continue with North America, but then also all the regions, because you as a merchant want to sell to everybody out there, right? And so this will give you the information. If you're selling to somebody in Australia or somebody in England or wherever it may be, you'll have the information of what works for those particular consumers.
Was that helpful? Great, fantastic. Another question up here in the front?
Yeah, so how long do you suggest running these tests? And then when you move on to the next test, do you then remove that previous test and test from a baseline, or do you stack on top of the previous test?
So to repeat the question for folks in the back who may not have heard, it's the length of test, and then are we repeating or stacking or running tests in parallel? Yeah, that's great. So maybe Oliver, you want to take that first, and then we'll do a round robin?
Sure. So as far as running tests at the same time, yes, we do. So the high conversion platform that we're using basically lets us set up independent experiments, and then the platform will kind of just take care of all those combinations. We maintain a 10% minimum baseline of traffic that still sees the unaltered site, that doesn't have any experiments running on it. So that lets us compare the results from each of the experiments independently to the baseline. So that's how we're able to run them independently.
That's great. Was that helpful?
Yes.
Great.
And 60
Dwayne, how are we
days.
doing on time?
60 days is generally what we're shooting for in terms of time.
Oh, my apologies. Okay, I couldn't see you over there. Fantastic. One last question.
So what about high dollar value checkout? So let's say 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. So how does your study relate, or did you quantify any data with regards to those types of checkouts?
Yeah, to repeat the question, high AOV, 5,000 or above, I don't believe that we have any in the cohort.
No, I don't think so either. I think the average across all of the cohorts was somewhere around $100 AOV. There's some obviously that were higher than that and lower than that, but I don't think we had any merchants in that kind of range.
Okay. Great. So it takes a lot to get up in front of your peers on a panel like this. Let's give these folks a hand, please. Thank you very much.